As we think about going back to school and preparing for all of that, one of the things that we are considering is the distractions that will get in our way. This morning, we saw that the physical distracts us from the spiritual. The only time the word distraction is used in Scripture is in Luke chapter 10 and verse 40, where the Bible says that Martha was distracted by much serving. We notice that the idea of planning a meal is not the problem, but the idea was that at the moment she had a chance to be at the feet of Jesus in school, and she chose instead to be involved with the physical and preparing a meal. She might not ever have another chance to sit at the feet of Jesus, but she certainly could eat tomorrow. And so we talked about that. And then we noticed all the physical distractions that come to life: pleasure, people, possessions, special people, the peers that we hang around, and position. Those things distract us, and we notice that the word distraction has as its root our word, spasm. It's a stiffening. A spasm is stiffening of the muscle to the point of a cramp, and it hurts. And that's exactly what distractions are. Distractions are a spasm in life. They are the stiffening of physical muscles that weaken our spiritual moment. So tonight, let's think about them and use one of the greatest distracted people of all time to understand how to handle distractions. Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Probably not one of us would believe that there was anybody more distracted than Solomon. I mean, this guy, of all the things that distract us, he was distracted by all of them, and because he was so wealthy, he did it to a greater detail than any of us ever have a chance to do it. He was a distracted man. And the book of Ecclesiastes, I think, is about how he says to deal with distractions. Why was it a problem? How can you deal with it? Now let me ask a question right quick. How many of you would say, I'm going to raise my hand first because I may be number one on the list. How many of you are competitive people? Let's see. Not as many as I would have thought. Okay. How many of you are not competitive at all? It doesn't matter to you who wins or doesn't win. So the rest of you are lying. Okay. What is it? What is the deal? Either you don't know you're competitive, you don't care, you're not even competitive enough to raise your hand. I get it. Okay. Now, here's the deal. If you're like me and you are competitive, then you're in the right thing as a Christian. Because every single day is a competition, right? Every day is a competition to Christianity. And if you are a competitive person, that ought to just get your juices flowing. It doesn't work that way, does it? If you're not competitive at all, then the Christian life is a little difficult because, it's competitive. Now, you don't like it, but there's somebody out there competing. In fact, Peter said, the devil is like a roaring lion walking about seeking whom he can devour. That's competition. I want to suggest to you that the distractions of life are the evidence that we are in a competition every day. Every day we are in a competition, and the distractions say that. Now, what are we competing for? Even if you're not competitive, there's something we all have in common. And I believe, and the writer of Ecclesiastes talks about it in chapter 3, there is a God-created whole in the life of every single individual. Everyone. And the competitions that we are in, whether we're really into it or we're just being beaten up by it, it is a competition to fill that hole. That's what it's about. And the distractions of life are about trying to find contentment. Can't help but think of Paul in Philippians 4 and verse 11. I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. We try to figure out what contentment is. Does that mean being stalemated? I'm content, I will just sit down. I'm content, I don't need any more, need any less, I'm going to quit. I'm going to do nothing, I'm content. That's not what Paul is saying. In fact, I think Paul is saying what we're going to look at here in just a minute. But he is saying there is a way that he has filled that God-shaped hole. God created hole. He is therefore content. So what has he done? Well, first of all, let's look at the warnings that Solomon has given in chapter 5. To confront these distractions, confront this competition, there are some things we need to understand. First of all, let's understand the reality of what we're confronting. Let's go to verse 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. Here's what he's saying. Number one, these things of life, the stuff of life, the distractions which are the stuff of life, do not equal contentment. That's what he's saying. Notice how he said it. If you love silver, you won't be satisfied with it. If you have silver, it seems like to me he's saying, if you don't really have much, but you really want it, you're not going to be content. But then he says, if you have a lot and you want more, you're not going to be content. Contentment does not equal the stuff of life, or the stuff of life does not lead to contentment. Now, Solomon has the right to tell us that because he had stuff. Now, I use the word stuff to define everything from money to possessions to power to people in his life, all the things we talked about this morning. Solomon had every bit of that, and he was distracted by it. And he would say, these things, stuff, it doesn't equal contentment. Look at the first part of verse 12. I'm going to skip down to it. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much. More or less stuff does not equal more or less contentment. In fact, it has nothing to do on the contentment scale. This person he's talking about is content. This person in verse 12, whether he eats little or much, now that's a content person. And it's the stuff of life. Whether you have more or less does not say, I have more contentment or I have less contentment. It just isn't registering on the contentment scale. But now back up to verse 11. The truth of the matter is, more stuff equals less contentment, oftentimes. And with the attitude that we're going to talk about in a moment, I'd say every time. Notice how he says it. He's saying that people with more stuff aren't content. You know why? Because the more stuff you get, the more people who eat it. Many, many years ago, Becca and I were first year or two of marriage. I talked to Orrin about this the other day. One day, he presented me a check. He said, we just want you to have some money. And I was joking with him, going to joke with him, and I said, thanks a lot. You just cost me to pay more taxes. And he said, that's not true. You can get up to $3,000 without paying taxes on it. Well, fine. Why did you stop so short? Now, isn't it true? Somebody is taking a piece of every new dollar you make. Isn't that how it works? What do they say about getting a truck, guys? You're going to move everybody. Right? About a trailer, Brett. You're going to move everybody. In other words, what he's saying is, people aren't really content either because they don't just get it. Others dip into it. You become open to everybody else. Somebody's going to take a piece here and take a piece there. Every parent knows that. We live our lives getting things together, and our children come in, and we're glad to give it to them and help out and do all this, but it's the truth. And that's what the writer is saying. Go down to the end of verse 12 and on down through verse 17. Notice what he says about how more actually equals less on the contentment scale. He said, riches kept for the owner cause hurt. Is it because having stuff hurts you? No. Notice what he said. Riches kept for the owner. He's talking about an attitude here, isn't he? He's talking about someone who says, I want stuff, and I'm after stuff, and I want to make sure that I have stuff. It's all about me. It's about me and my stuff. Isn't that what distractions are? Aren't the distractions of life about me and my stuff? Here he says, verse 14, they're not going to be really content because all riches perish. Everything that we call stuff, any of those things we talked about this morning, they all die out, they all decay, they all end. You can be on the top of the mountain for a while, but then before long, somebody knocks you off. Either because they are stronger or because your strength fades. Everything perishes. Verse 15, when we die, we're not taking anything with us. All the stuff stays here. Verse 16, just as you came in, that's how you're going to leave, no matter how hard you work. This is the attitude that he's approaching. This is why Solomon would say over and over, life is full of vanity. But he wants us to understand the truth about the distractions. The truth of distractions is they don't equal contentment. They just don't. Now we know that. What I'm wanting us to do is to recognize it. Every time we are distracted from this spiritual pursuit to anything, at least for that moment, we think that's better. We think that's the way to go. That's the truth. Contentment doesn't come through all of those distractions. So what does the wise man say? What is the cure for the distractions of life? What do we have to do not to be distracted from our spiritual journey? He says, stay busy, stay focused. Verse 18, here's what I've seen. This is Solomon saying, I've been through all of this. Here's what I've figured out. I want you to learn from me. Here's what I've seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and to drink, and to enjoy the good of all of his labor in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him, for it is his heritage. Solomon said, if you work, whatever you get from work is a gift from God. Not only should we enjoy it, but he is saying, give God the credit. Don't be distracted, he says. Just stay on the path. Keep working. Keep laboring. Receive from that work and that labor that which God gives. Number 2. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. I think he's talking about 2 kinds of people. Here he's talking about people who have the ability and the opportunity to amass, to increase, to gain, to do more. There are people who have a talent to make money. God gives those talents. Don't credit yourself. Credit God, but just keep working. Keep working. Stay focused. Verse 20. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. I went to the Hebrew to try to figure out what the last phrase there means, and I couldn't find it. It's not in there. In fact, this last phrase should read something like this: God answers him with joy in his heart. Not keeps him busy, but rather answers him. I think that's interesting. Let's see if we can put it all together today. The distractions of life happen to be our attempt to find contentment in life. That's what they are. And so these distractions become things that draw us away because we think over there we're going to find some contentment. Maybe we pick up a new hobby. Maybe we spend time shopping and buying. Maybe we put new people in our lives that will help us in some way. Whatever it is, we're looking, I think by those distractions, we're looking for some kind of contentment. And the devil is saying, hey, look over here. You're not satisfied over there. Look over here. I'll give you something that'll really make you content. And the only reason we get distracted is because we lift up our eyes off of the job at hand and turn them to something else. The spasm of distraction is a physical muscle stiffening that weakens a spiritual moment. So what does Solomon say to do to handle the distractions? Get busy. Get busy. There are a lot of ways to get busy with handling distractions. I'm thinking about Joseph in Egypt. When the distraction was presented to him to participate in an adulterous relationship with a woman. All by himself in a new land nobody would ever know. And he ran away from the situation. He got busy and got out of there. How many illustrations can you think of people who, when faced with a distraction that would weaken a spiritual moment, got busy, stayed focused, and got out? That's what today has been about. The thorny ground represents the distractions of life that choke us out. Here's an interesting fact to me about that verse. The word choke, that original Greek word choke means this: to bind by becoming one. That's what it means. The distractions, the thorns of life, they will kill us if we so connect with them that we become one with the distractions. A wonderful preacher for decades in the Lord's church spent time in a rehab facility for work addiction. The distraction of the work, not the ministry, the distraction of the work, he became one with, and it choked the life out of him. Anything that weakens us spiritually can choke the life right out of us if we become one with that thing. It can be your job. It can be a hobby. It can be a person. It could be just things. But they will choke us, distract us, and take us away. I hope today that we are more aware of the need constantly to be in school with God, growing and learning and being, and the only way to do it is to avoid those distractions. Next week, we're going to spend time with the good soil, learning to be in school with God. Already today, a sister's been added to our family. Already today, we've prayed for 2 others of our family who have had needs. Tonight, if you need to obey Jesus and put him on in baptism, if you need us to pray for you, this would be the time we would be glad to do that for you. Will you come as we stand and sing together?